Thank you very much. I think, Mr. Speaker, at the lunch break, I was saying that I hadn't traveled very much outside of our three islands. Actually, I haven't traveled at all outside our three islands since February last year. But the fact is, there is obviously a significant tourism market still going on, and as a jurisdiction that has a very significant and valuable tourism product, with many people who rely on being able to participate in that, we need to get to that point, sir, where the country is reopened. I was saying that to say, Mr. Speaker, that we absolutely need to continue to improve our vaccination levels to give ourselves the best chance to reopen and stay open. And there are some realities we have to face, sir. As much as we have local community spread now, we will have more COVID coming in through the borders once the quarantine envelope is dropped. So we need to shift our reliance from relying on our quarantine envelope to protect us and shift it much more onto the vaccine protection. That is a fact, sir. We also have to shift into other areas. We need to do much more surveillance testing, and I'll come on to that, sir. That will involve a significant deployment by the public, both the public sector and the private sector, of lateral flow tests, so that we can test people much more rapidly, get results in 15 minutes, and if we find people that are positive, then we confirm that with a PCR test. But, sir, as I said, we are going to shift into a heavy reliance on our vaccines for our health, for our safety, for our lives. And we're not the only people, we are not the only country, we're not the only jurisdiction that have had to face that reality, albeit very often, and unfortunately for them, with a much lower vaccine rate, which we hope will make the difference for us and minimize our risk going forward while we continue to try to push vaccination rates or distribution. And there are many others even in our region. I think it was mentioned yesterday that Turks and Caicos have done the same approach with made it a condition for those who are on work permits. I think the difference with them was they made it an immediate requirement so that work permits would be terminated if the vaccine wasn't taken up. That, Mr. Speaker, is, in our view, very clearly a step too far. And, Mr. Speaker, it is not just the reality for us in Cayman is, it is not just a question of vaccines being required as a condition of working, as a condition of changing your immigration status within the country. Mr. Speaker, I would say that unless you are a Caymanian, virtually every single person that lives and works in the Cayman Islands travels at some point through the United States. Mr. Speaker, we have a very clear indication from the Biden administration, both directly as reported in the press in the U.S., as well as from U.S. embassies in the region, that they are implementing a requirement that you have to be vaccinated with an approved vaccine prior to visiting the U.S. So as much as there is a view that this bill, or these two bills, cause an issue, there is a reality that eventually the vast majority of people will have to be vaccinated in order to move around the world. That's just the direction of travel, pardon the pun. That's the way it's going. So, Mr. Speaker, I wanted to make it very clear that this bill is not, and this approach is not an us and them at all. This is about all of us surviving, thriving, and working together, protecting Cayman, protecting those people that are vulnerable. And it provides for circumstances, for medical certificates, for people who are certified by a doctor in their own country or a doctor here that they can't have it for a legitimate medical reason. And there's also a provision for exemptions. So this is not a cold, uncaring, calculated approach, Mr. Speaker. This very well reflects a level of care and understanding of certain realities. Mr. Speaker, I think I also want to make clear that this discussion around vaccines will have to continue. We will have to, as much as people may find it tiring, we will have to continue to encourage our own people to get vaccinated, sir. And we heard the Honourable Deputy Governor early in his contribution speak to that in terms of our frontline workers in the civil service in particular. Sir, this government respects the job, the contribution that the civil servants, that the frontline workers do. But I absolutely agree, and we support the Deputy Governor's perspective, that in as much as there is this absolute aspiration for the civil service to be world class, sir, we need to be leading in terms of protecting the people that we work with and protecting ourselves and our families as well. Now, as I said before, we fully understand that this is not an absolute protection. But this is something that absolutely does help. There's no doubt about it, sir. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to just update members in terms of border reopening discussions and work that has been undertaken insofar as it relates to the rationale behind this bill. Our vision is to get the country, sir, to a point where we can continue our reopening program and remain open in a responsible way. Not just trying to stay open, not just fighting against the odds to stay open, but doing it in a responsible way, in a safe way, where people are not suffering to any large extent. And so we have to do that by being prepared for and being able to manage the inevitable increase in COVID-19 cases to come with reopening of the borders, as I mentioned earlier. So I mentioned, to begin with, the outbreak of the Georgetown Primary School and the community spread that, well, it started, I guess, with Northside, but that was more contained. The Georgetown Primary School one we can definitely make a lot more connections to. And as a result of that, as I said before, we paused the reopening plan on phase 3 so that we wouldn't be reopening on October 14th. Now, Mr. Speaker, as we continue to have community spread, we have so far been in a fortunate position. We've not had anybody get particularly sick. We've had seemingly equal amounts of asymptomatic as well as mildly symptomatic people. And we've continued to test, contact trace, isolate, and manage the impacts. Mr. Speaker, that has provided the country in general, and this government, and when I say this government, I'm including not just the political side, but the civil servants as well, with a test, a very useful test of our systems, giving us a gauge of level of preparedness. How prepared are we? How ready are we to manage reopening? Because as much as this may present a challenge right now, reopening is going to present a bigger challenge if we continue to do things the same way. So the school-based community spread demonstrated that there is more work to be done to be ready. It identified where additional resources are needed and highlighted that there are still parts of the plan to be filled in, to be articulated, to be tested and communicated to the wider community. There are many lessons that were learned, Mr. Speaker, and the government is working through taking stock of the systems and improving every day, every hour, our state of preparedness. Mr. Speaker, my elected colleagues and I have reassured the Deputy Governor and the Program Board that the collective public service, including us, is willing to work together to itemize the lessons learned and incorporate the findings into an updated reopening plan, which is designed to further enhance the country's readiness and response capabilities. And an important lesson, Mr. Speaker, is that we as a community have the need, we have had to, and we need to continue to, rapidly shift from a position and a model and policy that seeks to eradicate COVID-19. That represents the past. That's what had been done at a time when we did not have vaccines, and the reality there wasn't much other choice to keep the country and the people safe. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that we do have community transmission now. And that has forced us to rethink many of the approaches. We do this with a far better understanding currently of the disease, its treatments, and of course we now have the strength of our vaccinations, which we need to continue to build on for the reasons I have noted previously. Mr. Speaker, we have to move on to living with COVID. The reality is we cannot continue to close all schools. We cannot continue to ban all indoor activities and exercise. We cannot continue to have the borders closed for much longer. We cannot expect to lock down for months to get rid of COVID, to get back to zero. That makes no sense. We have COVID in the community. We have to go forward. We have to manage it. We have to live with it. And we have to rely, as I said, not on the quarantine envelope, but the support provided by vaccinations. So now, Mr. Speaker, the government, the public service, the business community, our children, our citizens and residents of Cayman have to join together in taking the first collective steps of reimagining and then living our lives in a way that allows us to safely travel, to participate in daily activities, to have our children continue to receive in-class learning, and yes, to welcome visitors to our shores so that that essential part of our economy can be revitalized. Mr. Speaker, the important factor in getting the balance right as we continue to ensure to keep businesses and activities open is that we do so in a way which promotes safety and does not overwhelm our healthcare system. So for the not too distant future, Mr. Speaker, the key will be to quickly and efficiently identify and remove people from situations or scenarios in which they are COVID positive into isolation for themselves, for those that are positive. But we can't do that on a scale that's necessary with the current PCR testing, Mr. Speaker. It would prove to be too much of a strain on those testing centers that we have right now. But we can quickly identify and isolate cases, positive cases, from moving around the community by introducing lateral flow rapid antigen tests. Many of these tests, Mr. Speaker, can be self-administered and have the potential to eliminate many of the challenges presently faced by employers, patrons, customers, students, and those wanting to go to the gym. Lateral flow tests can be taken multiple times per week, and within 20 minutes, 15 or 20 minutes, we'll be able to identify if an individual is potentially positive, and then that individual can get a PCR test to verify the result. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, as a proper part of living with COVID and the model that that involves, we will need to re-examine isolation periods for vaccinated individuals. Mr. Speaker, public health is now going to be reducing this isolation period where there is potential exposure in a family from 14 days to 10 days, where the entire household is vaccinated. But as time goes along, Mr. Speaker, we may have to reduce this even further, and perhaps even remove isolation if it is matched with a daily lateral flow test for the period of potential infection. Living with COVID, Mr. Speaker, means that we will try to keep our unvaccinated children in school using regular lateral flow testing and the isolation of those who are positive rather than the whole class. If one person in a class is positive, that class will move to daily testing until those who might be incubating the virus are isolated. We'd be acting on evidence rather than a more risk-based approach at the moment. Now, this is the proposal, Mr. Speaker. This is imagining how we do this. Fundamentally, our ability to do this depends on our authorization of these lateral flow tests. And I have been promised, Mr. Speaker, that these tests will be approved by tomorrow, so that there will be clarity around what tests can be brought in and the procedures around it, around the use of them. There's no point, Mr. Speaker, in doing tests without having reporting. So we've got to have a clear process around that. So this proposal, this model of living with this, is one which is a lesson learned, would be a lesson learned from shutting down entire schools, which we know can prove very challenging for all involved, not least the parents, employers, and our children. The Ministry of Education has done a great job, Mr. Speaker, in developing multiple plans for dealing with various scenarios. But we can appreciate, and we must appreciate, that we must also operate our schools safely. And if we have large numbers of teachers and students who are ill, and if we have untenable levels of absence because parents are unwilling to send their children to school, then we will have to make some adjustments. There is no one-size-fits-all on this, sir. We will have to make adjustments as we move along. That is absolutely the reality. We will have to make adjustments until we find the right balance. That is a reality. Employers too, Mr. Speaker, will have to do their part. As I mentioned before, if we are to safely control COVID and manage it, we can't have employees feeling as if they have to choose between their job and their health or that of their children. So while we look to make practical adjustments to quarantine periods for those who are vaccinated, we can't allow COVID-positive employees to simply continue to go working without isolating. That's not safe, not healthy, or wise. But these are but a few examples, Mr. Speaker, of what we can do in the not too distant future. The fact is we are living with COVID now, and we are seeing the consequences, and we are learning the lessons from a practical perspective. Thankfully, we have not had any significant degree of sickness. But we're doing it. And we're going to do it successfully, sir. And in the coming weeks, we will need to re-engage in the discussion around reopening our borders. As a government, Mr. Speaker, we know the challenge is to balance the imperative to keep our community safe with the imperative of reopening responsibly. That is a balancing act. Our goal is to safely and responsibly reopen the country to vaccinated visitors with systems in place that would not require isolation upon arrival, and to safely and responsibly reopen in a manner which both minimizes the number of COVID-19 hospitalizations and aims to maintain the number of COVID deaths to zero, or effectively to the two we have now. Now that is our moonshot. That is us trying to do something that's very, very difficult. But try we must, Mr. Speaker. And it is the realities of all the risks that are facing us which is driving us to the position we are in today, where we want to maximize our vaccinations. If we can develop a plan that contemplates both reopening and how to live with COVID after reopening, we'll have the best chance of avoiding any subsequent closing of borders or, God forbid, lockdown. When we say we rely on the science, it means we are relying on the combined advice of experts across a number of disciplines, and we are applying that to our local fact pattern. Not a lot different from comments that I've heard from the other side today in terms of, and yesterday, in terms of take the advice, but make good decisions. That is what we have to do, sir. And we have been doing that. We have been pushing where things don't make sense, where they seem to create more problems than they solve. We push back. And hopefully that leads to a decision. And I expect the other side to push back too. I expect the advisors to push back. I expect them to tell us if we're going down the wrong path that we're leaning into. I expect them to tell us that it's the wrong path and why, so that we have a very clear idea of how we are going to get there, sir. So, Mr. Speaker, what we will do in the coming period of time, coming weeks, is to give the country an effective, implementable, and resource-identified plan that Cabinet has decided on before reopening, a plan which provides predictability, accountability, and transparency that we can share with everyone, stakeholders, the public, all of government. Because we must have everyone in this country, Mr. Speaker, sharing in that confidence. And by that, Mr. Speaker, I also include the members on the other side. So we will be looking forward to engage with members on the inside, bring them in to have discussions about how we are proposing to move forward with this. Mr. Speaker, just in brief, the areas involved with the plan will deal with the public health system, social practices, testing and reporting, isolation regimes, vaccination levels or vaccinations period, immigration and entry requirements, employment and labor matters, education-related matters, travel, data and analytics, law enforcement, of course, emergency response, information sharing, and communications. Broadly, Mr. Speaker, these are the types of areas that will be included. So in terms of moving forward, Mr. Speaker, we will be waiting on the next round of updates from the program board that we have been feeding a lot of information into. And we'll work together on finalizing that plan and then have the discussions with other stakeholders. Mr. Speaker, we cannot, for those who want us to just pick a date and just run with it, at this point, that is probably not the smart thing to do. I don't want to just pick a date, or we don't want to just pick a date and run with it and cross our fingers and hope for the best. We say we rely on science. It means we rely on the advice and recommendations in an updated plan, which has had the input of experts in the public service and public health, so that we can evaluate the country's readiness to not only open, but very importantly, remain open safely without having lockdown scenarios, without having to contemplate shutting down. Mr. Speaker, I'll finish up very quickly. The fear of getting COVID is understandably distressing to many. The uncertainty of not having a reopening date is equally distressing to others. These are not just difficult and uncharted circumstances to navigate, sir. They are scary to some people, and we have to get the country ready. And I think we've had a rapid shift over the past weeks in that mindset, in that which has scared people. And our experience with our level of vaccinations, I think, has borne out our confidence in continuing to rely on vaccinations as the level of protection that we'll have, including any other public health and safety measures. That is why we have a focus on vaccinations, sir. So what feels devastating to us, Mr. Speaker, is something that is left to balance. But that is still better than what our neighbors in the Bay Islands have had to deal with. On Sunday, when the fire ripped through their community and damaged 150 homes or whatever it was, between 150 and 200 homes. I don't remember the exact number. A lot of lives impacted there, a lot of not deaths, thankfully, I think, but lives impacted nevertheless. However scary it is right now, sir, we are still in a far, far better position than many other countries, many other communities. And we have the benefit of having achieved a vaccination rate which is one of the highest in the world, but that is no guarantee for us that we will be successful, as successful as we want to be. and we must continue to push that. The challenges we face and the hurdles we have to overcome are all manageable if we all focus together on working with mutual respect, reason, logic, and teamwork. As I said, Mr. Speaker, at the outset, it is our vision to get the country to a point where we can continue with our reopening program and responsibly remain open. We feel we need to give the country at least a month's notice. So we will be making, after all of the assessments we make and determinations as to our readiness, we will be seeking to give the country at least a month's notice before we effectively propose to press on to phase 4 and drop the quarantine requirements. To do that, Mr. Speaker, requires the input and cooperation of our stakeholders, of our citizens, of all our residents. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, I want to give those who have an issue with these bills the clarity and assurance that this is not about us and them. This is about us looking at them as being a part of us. This is about us as a country with all of our guests, all of our friends who are here with whatever immigration status, working along with us and helping us, sir. Mr. Speaker, I will leave it there, except to say thank you to all of those people who have been in touch and who have communicated. And we look forward to working with everyone to continue to make Cayman a safe, strong, and prosperous country in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Does any other member wish to speak? A member from Georgetown West.
Chris, yes. So you can have that one? Maybe one day. Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on the Immigration Transition Amendment Bill, and I thank you for allowing me to do so. I'm going to be brief, hopefully, because I have a doctor's appointment which I spoke to you about, so I will try to cut this down, this 2-hour speech, to a little while. Mr. Speaker, governments are elected to represent people with two of the highest responsibilities, being the health and safety of its people and providing an economic environment that allows its people to live a satisfying and fulfilling life. I believe the health and safety of our people is the most important responsibility government has. Part of being an elected member of parliament is that we have to make very difficult decisions, which may not necessarily be the most popular at the time. These decisions, in most cases, affect the lives of our people. I was part of the government of unity, which did a great job of providing stable and responsible economic policies that gave confidence to investors and residents and put government in a very healthy financial position. Little did anyone know what was to come. Mr. Speaker, about a year and 9 months ago, the world suddenly became aware of the spread and danger of COVID-19. We had to make very difficult decisions, including closing our borders and ultimately to impose a period of strict lockdown in our successful effort to protect our people from the spread of COVID-19. It is easy to forget the fear and uncertainty everyone experienced and to explain the difficult discussions and decisions involved in making the tough decisions we did. We took the best advice available, and after extensive research and with prayer, we had many deep and thoughtful discussions which led to decisions we believed to be the best for our people. I am proud of what our government achieved, and I have said it before, but I could not be proud of our Premier at the time, the Honorable Alden McLaughlin. Mr. Speaker, many of our decisions were not popular at the time, but our Honorable Premier with his team and his government undertook an unprecedented campaign to inform our people of what decisions were made and the reasoning behind those decisions. Daily press briefings with our former health minister here, the Honorable Dwayne Seymour, were watched by the majority of the people, followed by long sessions of questions and answers. While some people may not have liked or agreed with some of the policies and answers, it became very obvious that the Premier was directly involved in the detailed planning and discussions which led to these decisions. He was in a position to answer all questions because he had the deep underlying understanding of why decisions had been made. He instilled confidence in the population, and whether some agreed or disagreed with the decisions, they could tell he had an intimate knowledge of how and why those decisions were made. That can only come from doing the hard work and putting in the long hours that he and we as the government did. Mr. Speaker, the response from the Caymanian people was amazing. The government of unity is so proud of the way our people took the tough decisions and changed their lives to adapt to the new reality of COVID. The thoughtful understanding and discipline displayed by our people is what allowed us as a country to become one of the most successful countries in the world in dealing with the COVID pandemic. But, Mr. Speaker, those were the first steps in the long-term fight against COVID. Having contained and stopped the disease in our country, we knew we could not continue indefinitely with our borders closed and isolated from the rest of the world. Our government had a comprehensive plan for moving forward and were in the process of developing plans to safely reopen our borders as soon as possible. Unfortunately, we were not given the chance to continue our fight against COVID and keep Cayman safe while we reopen our borders and contact with the rest of the world. Mr. Speaker, we have to reopen our borders as soon as we are safely able to. It has been a tough couple of years for most local businesses, and although government was in a good position and therefore able to help, we all know this situation cannot continue indefinitely. I am in favor of reopening our borders, but only when we are ready and fully prepared to protect and treat our population. Recent events have shown that COVID will spread very easily and quickly when it enters the community. The fact is that when we reopen our borders, there will be community spread of COVID, and some of our population will get sick as a result. Mr. Speaker, when the pandemic started, our primary goal was to stop it. We knew we did not have the resources to treat all who would get seriously ill with COVID. And as a responsible government, we did everything in our power to make sure we did not get into a situation where we could not treat all our population that became ill. We were successful in achieving that goal. We then did everything possible to get whatever we needed to keep our people safe. With the help of the British government and extraordinary efforts by members of our community, we were able to source enough PPE resources to keep our people safe. Mr. Speaker, one of the important parts of this fight to keep our people safe was in getting access to vaccinations against COVID. We owe a great debt of thanks to Britain for the tremendous efforts to supply us with the vaccinations, among other resources. At a time when they were deeply concerned with providing for residents of the UK, they were instrumental in supplying us with enough vaccines to treat all of our population who wish to be vaccinated. Mr. Speaker, I am pro-vaccine. At first, I was hesitant, but I prayed about it and did as much research as I could, and then made the decision early on to get my shots. I would encourage everyone to get vaccinated, and from the numbers, Cayman has one of the highest percentage of population vaccinated in the world. I believe this will help us to combat the spread and illness from COVID when we reopen our borders. But Mr. Speaker, I am against making it mandatory to be vaccinated at this time. COVID has only been known about for less than 2 years, and the vaccine, which was rightly rushed to market, has only been in existence for less than a year. There is no way we will know everything about COVID and the best ways to fight it, and there is no way we fully know the effectiveness or the side effects of taking the vaccine. This is obvious as every day we are getting new information about it. I'm sure over the coming months and years, as information and experience grows, there will continue to be changes in recommendations and advice on the best way to treat COVID and the effects of the vaccine. Mr. Speaker, I believe that until there is enough experience and information on the possible side effects of the vaccine, we cannot make it mandatory. I would encourage everyone to get the vaccine, but I will not support making it mandatory. There are reported cases throughout the world, and even here in Cayman, of serious health issues which are believed to be linked to the vaccine. It may eventually be found that some of these serious health issues were not directly linked to the vaccine, but only time and studies will tell. And until we are completely sure of possible side effects and risks, we cannot impose mandatory vaccinations on our people. Mr. Speaker, some may feel this bill only targets work permit holders and applicants for residency for various reasons, so why oppose it? First of all, it is not right to discriminate between one segment of the population and another. If it is a right thing to do, then we should be doing it for all. It is very telling that they are not putting the requirements on Caymanians at this time, because I'm sure they know the backlash that will happen if they try to impose mandatory vaccination on all Caymanians. But if the vaccination is so good and important, why are they excluding Caymanians from being forced to take it at this time? The truth is, if we continue to require effective quarantine and tests for those that enter our country, we will stop COVID from entering our community. This way, they will not bring the disease into our country. We proved this for over a year. But that policy is unsustainable over the long term. If the worry is that these people entering Cayman might get COVID once they are here, and if not vaccination, they would be a burden on our resources, then why is this government not concerned about Caymanians getting sick and not being able to get whatever treatment they need? This tells me that this bill is the thin edge of the wedge. They are hoping that by only targeting those coming to stay in our country, Caymanians will be fooled into thinking that it will not affect them. I believe Caymanians will not be that easily fooled. Mandating the vaccination may be against the Cayman Bill of Rights, our medical law, and international human rights treaties that we are bound to. We can be sure this will be tested through the courts over the coming years. And then maybe that's when it will be forced on to Caymanians. But to introduce mandatory vaccinations to only a small segment of the population will certainly lead to charges of discrimination. This will be challenged in the courts of law and may eventually be overturned, but in the meantime, one way of dealing with it will be to make it mandatory for all the population. In recent correspondence, I have seen the comment in writing that it is possible that additional measures will be introduced.
Honorable Minister of Tourism, are you rising on a point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker. As per the standing orders of this Honorable House, members are not allowed to read from statements unless their ministers bringing them a statement from their ministry. Now, granted, until the member started talking stuff that I don't necessarily agree with, I can't give him that leverage considering the fact this is his second term and he knows the rules. So he better add some ad-libbing to that speech that only God knows who wrote for him. And there's a reason why those rules are there, because I don't know if somebody else wrote that statement for him. So the standing orders say you can't be reading from a script.
The Minister of Tourism, I'm sure you have more patience than that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I must say that I think I have the latitude to allow such matters, but when it's drawn to my attention, I have to take note, Honourable Member.
Mr. Speaker, this is what I wrote. I gave it to somebody, which was my brother, to go over it, because sometimes, I be a little rough and I say some things that I shouldn't say, and he takes it out. So that's what I make him look over. But I'm just reading what I wrote.
It's always good to have someone looking over your shoulder. I always believe that.
Yeah,
carry on, Honourable Member, carry on. From what I observed, I thought you had copious notes.
This leads me to believe that they know they will not be able to maintain mandatory vaccinations for only incoming residents without eventually having to impose them on all the population. Mr. Speaker, as I said before, I am for reopening our borders as soon as possible. But in order to reopen safely, we must be fully prepared to deal with the inevitable spread of COVID through our community. I mentioned before about the tremendous work and effort the Government of Unity undertook to stop the spread of COVID in our community. We were very aware that we could not allow ourselves to get into a position where we did not have enough medical supplies, enough ventilators, enough doctors and nurses, or enough hospital beds to treat the number of people who would become ill. We had to stop the spread immediately. With really hard work and planning, and then communicating these plans to our people, we accomplished this goal. A similar effort is needed to take the next step. But while I'm on the topic of reopening the borders, I personally would like to make it known that I think it's very irresponsible for any member of Parliament on either side to think that they can open the borders, reopen the borders just for travel perks. And let me tell you something, lives are far more important than any personal gain or pleasure. That's my personal feelings. Government must take a hard look at what our next steps should be. They cannot just pluck figures and dates out of the air and hope for the best. They must consider, among other things, the number of people who are vaccinated and the number of these that will likely still become ill from COVID. We should be careful about using a percentage figure, and I heard this yesterday, because as one example, we cannot use the number of vaccinations given as a percentage of the population. We know that there are many people who came to Cayman during the pandemic because we were a safe haven and offered a great quality of life, took the vaccine, and who have left and returned to their homes. I personally experienced that when I was taking my vaccine. A family was here for a wedding, and they were leaving within 2 weeks. They should not be counted as part of our vaccinated full-term residents. We should then look at the number of people who are not vaccinated and what number of those people would likely become ill. Add this to the number of children likely to become ill. When we have researched and considered the real number of people likely to become ill from COVID on reopening, we need to make sure we have the necessary supplies in hand to treat that number of people. This should include the resources I mentioned before, and also enough supplies of the drugs which have been shown to be effective in treating those that have become ill with COVID. When we have done this exercise and thoroughly researched the real consequences of reopening, and we are convinced we have all the supplies and resources we need to protect our people, we then need to communicate this to our population in an honest and clear way. When these things are all done, then we can begin to set a plan for reopening. If government is effective in doing this, there will be far less opposition to the reopening. Mr. Speaker, with our hands-on experience of successfully stopping the spread of COVID in our community, the opposition offered our help and assistance in any way possible. To this date, government have not taken us up on this offer. While we cannot understand why this government would take this position, if they do everything necessary to ensure we are prepared to provide whatever health care is needed by our people when the borders are reopened, then we cannot complain. We know from experience, if they have done the hard work, have thought through detailed plans, and they communicate this to the Caymanian population, our people will do whatever is necessary. But if they do not have the confidence in how prepared our government is, we also know Caymanians will not accept the decisions. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I would just like to ask whether the changes in the bill or bills being debated make mandatory for foreigners vaccination, for the foreigners to have vaccinations for only COVID-19, or does the new requirements apply to all notifiable diseases? In other words, do foreigners who are caught by the vaccination net have to show proof of vaccination only against COVID, or will they require to show vaccination against all notifiable diseases? Mr. Speaker, I received an email which I would just like to mention. It was a Caymanian who applied for a job at the civil service as a civil servant, was accepted and was told and received this reply that, and I'll read this little part. The offer, she was accepted. The offer is conditional upon receipt of the following, and it states: 1, satisfactory medical report, brackets letter of request attached, birth certificate, marriage certificate, passport index page, proof of qualification, and this is number 6, proof of vaccination, health service authority card. This morning, Mr. Speaker, this morning the Deputy Governor stated that no Caymanian civil servant would be mandated to take the vaccine. I just want a little clarification if this is the case. It says number 6, this offer is conditional upon receipt of the following: proof of vaccination. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I just have to apologize that I spoke to you before. I have to run to do a little surgery on my shoulder. But if I was here, I might miss the vote. But if I was here, I just want to let you know, and the Cayman people know, and whoever is listening, that I will be voting, or I would have voted no against these 2 bills. Well, I voted no against the first one, so I'll be voting no against this bill. Thank you very much. Right? Why is that?
Does any other member wish to speak? Does any other member wish to speak? If not, I'll call on the mover for his right of reply. And before we do that, I'd ask for a very short suspension, and I'd ask members to stay in their seats. The Premier, Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start out by thanking everyone who contributed to this debate on both sides of the aisle, all parliamentarians. Mr. Speaker, there's an old Japanese proverb entitled, "For want of a nail." And the proverb says, "For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a message, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. The kingdom was lost, all for the want of a horseshoe nail." Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Honorable Leader of the Opposition spoke about the law of unintended consequences. And I completely agree with him in that regard, where one of the things I've always been mindful of from the minute I got elected to this honorable house is to be mindful of legislative impact, the impact of what legislation can have. And that's the reason I said from very early on that this decision by this government was not taken lightly. As a matter of fact, we ourselves had many disputes on this side in terms of where we started, where it should have reached the whole 9 yards. But the good thing with our democracy, Mr. Speaker, is that it says, if you look at the democratic process, it says that we'll have differences, we'll have disagreement, we'll have discord, we'll have dissent. But what it also requires is that we have debate, we have discussion, we have dialogue, and we find consensus. And we come to a decision. I also want to thank the Honorable Member from Red Bay. He did point out some things. And what I can say is that he's right. I mean, the more eyes you can have looking at something. And I was glad he uses legal eyes on some aspects of the bill. And I can say that even as a result of that, we even had more committee stage amendments, which is actually filed earlier today. And that is how our system works. We pass laws, and the good thing about parliamentary supremacy is that no current parliament can bind a future parliament, which in essence means that barring the Constitution, any law passed in this House can also be reversed in this House. As information change, as things change, laws change. That is the beauty of our system. And so I say all of that to say, Mr. Speaker, is that, yesterday the Honorable Leader of the Opposition said that, this issue would define this government. And to some extent, he's right. But the question is, how does it define us as a government? I can tell you, it defines us as one that is doing what we need to do to make sure that our people are protected. It defines us as one of action, one that we are people-driven, and more importantly, Mr. Speaker, one that demonstrates that we're not afraid to make the hard decisions. Government isn't easy, and every member in opposition is aware of that, and every member on this side, whether just joining us now as a first term, is also aware of that. The Honorable Leader of Opposition, Mr. Speaker, also said that if we had just put this law in for first-time work permit holders, it would have put us on firmer grounds. I would have loved to have seen where that legal opinion would have come from. And I would have definitely loved for that to have been shared with us, as with the other legal opinion that was shared. I take my advice, and the government take their advice, and the Parliament take the advice from the Honorable Attorney General, Samuel Bulgin, QC. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Attorney General gave a masterful presentation yesterday with regards to the law. If there's one person in this Honorable House that I've seen many things from different aspects, starting out as a young criminal prosecutor, I remember many times seen as a Crown prosecutor, pulling his little briefcase going to court to defend these streets, defend our people from criminals, to where he is today. And if I must say, the Honorable Attorney General is one that truly demonstrates what being Cayman is about, and also what the story of what Cayman is about. Everyone knows he hails from Jamaica, but through hard work, dedication, commitment, he is integrated well within the Caymanian society and has become part of the Caymanian fabric. Thus, I've said over and over again that Cayman's success was not based on immigration, but rather integration. And I want to thank you, Mr. Bulgin, for all you have done for my country. The Honorable Leader of Opposition, Mr. Speaker, also said that we should trust people to manage their own risk. People should decide if they want their specialist caregiver to be vaccinated. I want to thank the Honorable Member for Red Bay, former Premier, for actually supporting that at least specialist caregivers should be vaccinated. And I think that was a responsible thing for him to do. But, Mr. Speaker, it begs the question, if we are to leave people to manage their own risk, then I ask the question, why are we even here? Why do we even have a government? Should we ask people to manage their own risk when they come on to inspecting food, inspecting meats? Should we just not close down the police station, close down the fire station, let them manage their own risk in their homes? So, Mr. Speaker, it doesn't work like that. As a government, as a people, that changed when we became more civilized. There was a time in human history where we managed our own risk. We refer to that as the caveman days or the wild, wild west. We no longer even live in those days. We have speed limits. We set standards. We have inspections. We make sure your houses are built right. If not, people just go put up any little piece of concrete, 2x4, and say that's a house. Everyone, Mr. Speaker, cost planning for the longest time, asking too much. Last year we had the earthquake, everybody couldn't stop thanking planning. Said, boy, thank God you guys made it so hard for us to do this. We had an earthquake that many other places, Mr. Speaker, should have had more damages. We did not. Why? Because we have a planning department that manage people risk when they're building. Thank you, the Honorable Member for Boddentown. He's reminding us that too. This is what we're about. This is not going out and telling people to manage their own risk. As a community, as a people, that is what we do. And if that is the mindset, the good news is, Mr. Speaker, is that the Constitution also provides in the protection to share that view. But I can say we on this side do not share that view. We believe that the risk has to be managed, and it has to be managed for the greater good. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition also said this legislation is like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. I want to say to him again, 4.8 million people dead globally is not a nut. It is a sledgehammer. We are trying to manage a sledgehammer, and this is what this legislation is trying to do. This is not a nut, Mr. Speaker. 2 people on this island have died. I can guarantee you that their family do not think that the COVID virus is a nut. And for the many countries that are battling with it, it is not a nut. So again, I want to disagree with him in that regard. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition also said that the community spread was introduced because we reduced the quarantine days to 5. Well, Mr. Speaker, the member for Georgetown West, before he departed, had said that the government had offered to help the opposition, and we did not take up their offer. So the opposition had offered to help the government, and we did not take up their offer. Well, Mr. Speaker, again, the letter that was provided, or the statement that was done in this Honourable House by the former Premier says, and I read it again, when he was announcing the Christmas gift of the vaccine arriving on island, he says, the following restrictions would apply for people arriving from overseas. A, all travelers entering the islands with evidence of having received an approved vaccine course against SARS-CoV-2, which should have been completed before arrival, as according to public health recommendation, and a negative PCR test upon arrival, will be exempted from quarantine as per Section 5 of Control of COVID-19, Number 3, Regulations 2020, if living in accommodations where the other residents eligible for vaccinations have also received the vaccine. So in essence, Mr. Speaker, going by this, it appears that once you were vaccinated and arriving here with a negative test, and you were staying with people who were vaccinated, you didn't need to be quarantined. I think it has shown now that based on what we have seen and what we have heard since, that the previous government would have departed from that position. At least I hope they have. So again, Mr. Speaker, if that is a reflection of the quality of advice, then I think it's safe to say that we will prefer stick to the medical experts in giving us advice. Thank you, sir. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition also says, give the people choice. Well, there was a time when the people had to shop by name days. Who said that didn't want Wednesday versus Thursday? Some people couldn't go to the beach at different curfew hours. Again, I ask, where was the choice at that time? The people wasn't given any choice in that situation, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition also went on to say, permit holders invested here wants to leave. What is the impact? Well, Mr. Speaker, talk about the law of unintended consequences. I don't know what the impact may be if they want to leave, but I can tell you what the impact is when they want to stay. And we need to look no further, Mr. Speaker, than going back to one of the first major items that the previous government had to deal with when they started office in 2013, which was the TLEPs. I saw the member from West Bay North, Grunt, Mr. Speaker, I hear him grunt down there. And Mr. Speaker, if you go back and you look at what had happened, where we allowed an increase in demand, and they spoke about it many times, people buying land, wanting to stay and everything. When you have something that is in limited supply, that ain't growing, which is in essence land, and you increase the demand for it, Economics 101 tells you if supply is steady and the demand goes up, price will go up.
Automatically.
Law of unintended consequences, Mr. Speaker, can tell you this much. Even during your time, Mr. Speaker, when you were the first Premier of these beloved islands, you had to deal with the 2008 global financial crisis. We did not see Caymanians losing their homes during that period of time. But the law of unintended consequences tells us that when you increase the demand, automatically, what do you find? People go out looking to buy a property. And one of the first places they look was where? Distressed properties. And you find out many people had lost their homes to foreclosures at a time when Everywhere else the world was different. Again, the law of unintended consequences. So I agree with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, is that decisions that we make do come back and haunt us. And I know the Honorable Member for West Bay North and the Minister for Home Affairs was one of them that had opposed the old TLEPS issue, because I guess he was clairvoyant enough to see what would have happened. And today we have land prices through the roof because that demand has gone up, and property prices through the roof because of that demand. So I don't know what the effect may be if they leave, but I know what the effect is if they choose to stay. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of Opposition also read the support letter from the Christian Association. I smile on that one. The same association that wrote him on the same-sex marriage. I tell you one thing they're right about: politics do make strange bedfellows. They listen to them on one side, but they ignore them on the other. So, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition also spoke about lawyers from HSM will challenge the law. Mr. Speaker, I think the former member from East End had made it perfectly clear the damages that the HSM law firm had done in finding just about every loophole in our immigration law. So much so that employees were basically being able to get 25-year work permits, and in many cases depriving much qualified Caymanians from promotion because they were able to manipulate the law and find the different loopholes. So all I can say, if HSM want to challenge away. I have my feet in my Attorney General. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of Opposition also said the country is agitated. I'll ask him, as a political leader, a constitutionally recognized political leader in this country who holds the office of Leader of the Opposition, what did he do to try to decrease or reduce the agitation? That is something every single one of us in this House has as a responsibility. And don't worry, no, Honorable for Red Bay, I got this in sections, and I soon get to your section. Don't worry, I'm on the Leader of the Opposition. You next? Matter of fact, let me just double check. Yep, you next. Yep. So, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition also asked, Mr. Speaker, why the rush? Well, I can say we need to safely reopen our borders and rejoin the global community. I think everyone can agree it is time for us now to move to the next level. And he finished his section, Mr. Speaker, by saying a quote from Margaret Thatcher. I think it was a prayer that says, "Where there is discord, may we bring harmony. Where there is error, may we bring truth. Where there is doubt, may we bring faith. And where there is despair, may we bring hope." Mr. Speaker, Margaret Thatcher also had another quote, which I would like to read to the members of this honorable House. "Disciplining yourself to do what you know is right and important, although difficult, is a high road to pride, self-esteem, and personal satisfaction. But disciplining yourself to do what you know is right and important is still, although difficult, must be done." Mr. Speaker, the honorable member for Red Bay, in his contribution, he went down the 12 categories of foreigners that were caught in the net. And he went down them, and I can say I did enjoy his presentation because I did learn and picked up something on it that also needed to be addressed, that has slipped through the net in terms of what we intended, and I want to publicly thank the honorable member for Red Bay. But Mr. Speaker, while I was listening to him, it occurred to me that's part of the problem in this country. We have 12 categories, of foreigners, but only one category of Caymanians. And then we start wondering why Caymanians sometimes feel the way that they do. And Mr. Speaker, this is why it's important for us to recognize, and this is the reason why I campaigned on the slogan that I did of One Cayman. We have too many classes in this country. We are segregated too much, and whether we want to accept it or not, bad mind has found a way in our community that needs to be addressed. And we in this house also need to bear some level of responsibility for it. So that's why I think it's important for every one of us into this house to recognize that there's still one Cayman. This bill, despite what people want to say, and I want to thank the Premier for expanding on it, was never meant to be a us and them. And every one of us in this house have an automatic responsibility as to which side we should be on, because that is what we are charged for. But we also do recognize, Mr. Speaker, that the magic of what Cayman is, and that is why I alluded earlier to the Honorable Attorney General, is that he represents, he's one of many, one of thousands that have represented what Cayman is over the years. People who have come from overseas, joined us, work with us, abide by our laws, integrated in our community, and are now part of the Caymanian fabric. There was a time when I was born, Mr. Speaker, back in 1973. You could not tell Caymanian people back then that curry goat or curry chicken was part of their diet. No, you can't tell them otherwise, because that is part of our secret, the integration. That is what makes us who we are. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member for Red Bay also gave an example of a Jamaican marrying Jamaican, wife work, boat work, coming on to 8 years, need to apply for PR, need to buy land, the children born here, one in primary school, one in high school. Well, first I'd like to know which 8-year-old is in high school. That one kind of got me a little bit, but that's fine. Oh, that's the one I was born before. Okay, I didn't. Okay, thank you for clarifying that one. You know, but the point is, Mr. Speaker, I understand where he's coming from, and I want to thank the member for Prospect and the Honorable Minister for Health for a wonderful presentation this morning, explaining Cayman's strong relationship with Jamaica. And if there's one person in this house that can't be accused of being anti-Jamaican, it's me. Because if there's one thing, I think I've been more branded more on that side than anything else. And my love for Jamaica, Mr. Speaker, like yourself, is also well known, and to many others in this house too. Even the Honorable Member from Minister of Health from Cayman Brac East, and the Minister of Education from Cayman Brac East, also got a Jamaican blood. So every one of us, Mr. Speaker, are from roots. And the Honorable Minister for, the Honorable Member for Borden East reminded me that he had to defend me many times. That people forget that my neighbor string was cut right here. And only because, to this day, Mr. Speaker, and it's the one thing that I've not figured out yet, is being the only boy of 5, my father decided he wanted to send me to school in Jamaica because he didn't want to go up around 4 girls and become too soft. And the one thing it never occurred for me to ask him before he passed was, what behavior did I put out that he said, Rose, this boy need to go to school from Jamaica, he can't stay here. I don't know what I did. I don't know if I was playing with my sisters, I don't know. But something I did that triggered it, and I'm talking immediately now. I'm not talking like this is happening, he's starting a school term. I literally was yanked out in the middle of a school term and said, you're going to Jamaica. Which is fine, and to be honest, I actually enjoyed it. Some of the best years of my life, I had the most fun, but I tell you what it also did, Mr. Speaker. It made me appreciate Cayman more. It made me appreciate what we have here more. And even my time of going to school in New York made me appreciate Cayman more. Simple things that we take for granted, like the weather. Last year during lockdown, you didn't realize how much people like the beach. When people couldn't walk and they got let out, everybody was on the streets walking. Now you don't even see them. But just to go out, it shows you the effect that lockdown have on people and the actions that they do. Because everybody became an exercise nut during that time, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. Yep. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Member for Red Bay for at least agreeing that the specialist caregiver should be vaccinated. And I will ask him to have a discussion with the Honorable Leader of the Opposition and convince him also. But we're on this side already convinced, so you need to convince your own opposition leader on that side. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Leader of the Opposition also read out a letter from KSG. And again, I want to thank the Honorable Attorney General for his masterful presentation and clearing that up. And I actually did not know, nor the Cayman Islands people didn't know, that the actual opinion that was used to generate that letter was actually from the losing side. The dissenting opinion. So, Honorable Attorney General, I thank you. And on behalf of the government and the people of the Cayman Islands, we thank you for at least that clarification. So, if the letter to be made for the case is one that was from the dissenting opinion, aka the losing side, then the question is, why even bring that information here? So again, but the best one, Mr. Speaker, that I really enjoy was the suggestion to increase the payments to $2,500 for Christmas, or $2,500 for the displaced tourism stipend. Now, Mr. Speaker, earlier, maybe a month or so ago, the Leader of the Opposition criticized the Minister of Tourism for not budgeting the full year costs for displaced workers, called him a Grinch. And I will admit, Mr. Speaker, it's still about the truth, that our SPS forecast, that we did include half a month stipend for the month of November and half a month stipend for the month of December. I will admit that. And I can also admit that the minister, has the cabinet paper ready as yet? Has prepared a cabinet paper to come to ensure that the full stipend payments were made, or will be made for the month of November and December. But, Mr. Speaker, the point I want to make is this. The minister and the government, during our strategic policy statement, forecast for the year, included displaced tourism workers being paid half of November, half this time in November, half of December, and we're looking to correct that in the next Finance Committee. But what I would like to be clarified, Mr. Speaker, is that during the previous administration, the pre-election forecasts, they budgeted, I think, $911 or $912 million in costs for 2021. Do you know what was not included in that $911 and $912? The month of June 2021, how much was budgeted for stipend? Zero. The month of July 2021, what was budgeted for stipend? Zero. Month of August 2021, what was budgeted for stipend? Zero. Month of September 2021, what was budgeted? Zero. October, November, December, same thing, zero. So it is very nice when you can be generous. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, that many times in opposition, when we brought motions, the motions asked for the government to consider, because ultimately it is the government on this side that control the purse strings and many other things that go with it. But so I say all of that to say, Mr. Speaker, is that this. When the honorable member was talking about and going on in different categories, he kept using the term galang. I hope I caught it right. That's what I was telling people, that they should just galang. Yeah, was it galang? The only thing I have to say, Mr. Speaker, is that for all of those June, July, August, September, October, November, and December, I guess those people are expected to galang too. Mr. Speaker, I want to take this time out to thank the Minister of Health for reminding everyone again about the different policies that were implemented over the years and who implemented politics that affected the different communities differently. But you know what? I won't go into too much details. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to move to the Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition. He went through a long list of what the rest of the world was doing. And I beg to say, Mr. Speaker, he was actually missing the point of what we were trying to make. And I want to repeat it just so everyone is clear. What we're trying to do here is something that no other country have done successfully. Reopen our borders safely without going back into lockdown. So, Mr. Speaker, when they're giving us the list of what this country is doing, that country is doing, and all of that, let me repeat, if you want something you never had, you have to do something you never did. And equally, if we in the Cayman Islands want something no country has, we also have to do something no country did. So coming here and telling us what all of these countries are doing, other than to learn from their mistakes to make sure it don't happen, if that was the point he was trying to make, Mr. Speaker, he didn't make it, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt that that is what he was trying to do. But then, as I extended that benefit of doubt, Mr. Speaker, I went into his list of reading out all the stuff that the UK was doing. Now, the honourable member of Red Bay told him point blank, and I was here when he said it, but you can't use the UK as an example. And I must say, to some extent, if you look at the UK statistic, Mr. Speaker, the UK population is a little over 68 million people. They had 7.9 million cases and 137,000 deaths. There were people in the United Kingdom that believed the virus should just run its course and whatever, the Darwin type approach, survival of the fittest. 137,000 deaths later, of course you can open up any way you want. Because as far as you're concerned, is there anybody left to the virus to kill in the UK? 137,000? Mr. Speaker, I give credit where credit is due. The previous premier, to much opposition and to much upset in the business community, made some hard decisions. And no one can take that from him, and no one can take that from his government. As a matter of fact, this government is on record many times for thanking them to make the hard decisions. I know how we always had a good test of what those hard decisions were, Mr. Speaker. Every single time the government said or did something that ticked them off, they used to run to us in the opposition. But again, I want to give credit to the former leader of the opposition, Howard McLean, that took their approach one voice. For this crisis, for this pandemic, one voice is going to be that of the premier at the time. We did not want to play politics with this issue. This issue was too important. And this is why I say, and maybe it was a little bit foolish and naive of me to expect that as we make these hard decisions, for people who have sat in these seats and knows what comes with it, guess what? We expected them to have said, you know what? Those guys are working information that we don't have. Let's extend them that same courtesy that was extended to us. But politics being what it is, like I said, a little bit naive. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Deputy Leader of the Opposition also spoke about people uprooting themselves after 6 to 7 years living here. Is he now saying that he's against any kind of rollover policy? Mr. Speaker, while just about every country on this planet, including the Cayman Islands, have laws for how people can remain and integrate into the society, the immigration laws of every country, not just the Cayman Islands, is designed for non-nationals to uproot themselves and make way for the local citizens. I had a student visa, Mr. Speaker, to go to school in the U.S. When that student visa expired, my studies just about finished, I was gone too. There's a time when I was even going to school in Jamaica. I had to be going to immigration for time. I know what that feels. But because my daddy was Jamaican, I was able to get what they call unconditional landing, so I could have gone to school with no problem. But I know what it is like to be getting time in passports. Caymanians know what it is like. We have to go off and apply for a visa too. We know. And because of some policy, they didn't even have to apply for a visa to go to Jamaica to get a visa. But it is what it is. But the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that our immigration laws is designed for people to uproot themselves after 6, 7 years, because we have kids coming back from school that may possibly want those jobs. We have Caymanians that have gone out, invested in the kids, spent money, and the children want to come back and get good jobs. That's what the immigration laws are there for. That's why it is also protected in our Constitution that is not discriminatory. Now, if it's a situation now where they're saying that after 6, 7 years people uproot themselves is a problem, then I would suggest to them bring a motion when we bring the changes to the immigration bill, and we can deal with it then. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Deputy Leader of the Opposition also spoke about a lot of countries mandating the frontline workers to be vaccinated. I didn't understand where he was going with that and whether the examples come up, but I don't know if he wants to tell us that we should be looking to mandate frontline workers. All I can say is that any frontline workers, if they're Caymanian, we're not supporting any mandatory vaccination for any Caymanian period. We have made that perfectly clear already. And, Mr. Speaker, he also said that this debate took us far away from the subject. Mr. Speaker, you can't get any further than Alice in Wonderland. That's all I can say. Now, Mr. Speaker, the member for Bordentown East, I want to thank him for his contribution. And he brought a lot of levity to the House and reminded us just how much fun it can be inside here. And when we're not arguing or debating, that we actually get along very well. And I can say that from a good friend, the honorable member for Red Bay. But he did ask a valuable two things that he raised, Mr. Speaker, I want to touch on. He did speak about the speed of the vaccine, and I know a lot of people are concerned about the speed in which the vaccine was. And I can tell you, I did my own research, because like anyone else, I had my own hesitations too before taking the vaccine. And, sorry, huh? Yeah, I was too busy with the lecture, man. I did a campaign against you, you told me you was going to send nobody against me, and they made me work, man. But, Mr. Speaker, yeah, Mr. Speaker, one of the things I just want to note, and one is my research, is that, SARS itself has been around since 2002. And while you have different things along the way, SARS, the MERS, and all different kind of stuff, this issue is not new. It's just different variations. When we started out, this was the Alpha variant. You had the Delta variant, and you got the Mu. You got different variants. So we'll always have these kind of issues. So it is naturally right for people to question these things, because once you can inject anything in your body, anyone itself without pause. So I think that's a genuine concern. And I think, if anything, what I would ask the medical community to do more of is to see what they can do with the government to run more public awareness campaign with regards to the vaccine, the vaccination, and everything else. And because at the end of the day, the Bible says it best, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. But equally, the Bible also says that for those of us who have information, we have a responsibility to share that information. And I think, if anything, I want to say to the member Bordentown East, that is one of the things that we should be looking at to see what we can do to increase the vaccine uptake, and what we can do more in terms of an education outreach in that regard. Yeah, no, it's a valid thing. And he also raised the issue, Mr. Speaker, about assisting self-employed people in quarantine. And I can also say to him that that is something that the Honorable Premier did ask me to look into. I spoke to my Chief Officer, Wesley Howell, about it, and we are looking at a process to help people specifically and not have them go through the NAU process. but at the same time, just make sure that we have the proper checks and balances in place, because we are still spending the public's money. So I want to thank you for raising those things. I did take that out of the debate. Mr. Speaker, I want to also take the time out to thank the member for West Bay Central for her contribution. I can say that I was quite pleased when I heard that she wanted, and others wanted to debate, but because of time and everything else, she had kind of wanted to push a little bit more. So I want to say to her, it was a very good presentation. I enjoyed listening to it. It was very passionate, and I think the people of West Bay Central are well served for your contribution. So thank you very much for that, member of West Bay Central. Mr. Speaker, I really want to once again thank the Honorable Attorney General, Sam Bulgin QC, for a strong presentation, very strong presentation. He made the case that the mandatory vaccination reduces possible strain on the healthcare system. And again, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the statement that was read back in December in this Honorable House by the former Premier, he actually did make mention also in the sense of doing what is necessary to reduce the strain on the healthcare system. So there are some parts of his statement that I think we can definitely give credit where credit is due. But what is important for the people to understand, Mr. Speaker, is that just as we are asking vaccinated tourists to come here, people need to recognize that there was a time when this crisis started. Everyone became almost an expert overnight on certain terminology used in the healthcare profession. Flattening the curve, and if anybody remember that, was important. How many beds had ventilators, how many ICU beds, all of that. I mean, these are questions that people are asking because everyone naturally, you don't understand something, you're very fearful of it. And part of the whole idea behind that was to make sure that our healthcare system did not pick up a strain on it. We cannot then expect, Mr. Speaker, that as we reopen and join the global community and start with stay-over tourism, where thousands of people are coming on island, we can't be this ridiculous to say that we bring in 3, 4, 5, 10,000 people, even if cruise ships come in or whatever, and there's an outbreak or something goes wrong, that we are going to flood our island. One plane load alone, Mr. Speaker, can literally take out every ICU bed in this country. We cannot. It would be irresponsible of us to say to people, come here, be unvaccinated, and run the risk of putting a strain on our healthcare system. The knock-on effect of that, which the Attorney General, again, Mr. Speaker, made a masterful presentation of, is saying that the minute that happens, you are now directing much-needed, limited public resources to deal with that problem. The minute you do that, Mr. Speaker, you then have to start taking services from everywhere, from other places. Where are we going to take the money from when things are already tight? So it is almost irresponsible for us to say to people, be in this position to put a strain on our healthcare system. And we have it today right now, where there are some people in this country that the minute they have a major medical problem, and just earlier this year, many of us had to deal with something similar, where we have people who are non-Caymanians getting sick, really sick, and they don't have the adequate insurance coverage. The first thing is basically they need to go back and find the way home. Because the insurance costs and everything else. So these are real problems, Mr. Speaker. So to asking people to stay here to protect themselves at least against something that can probably lead to their death, or at least put a strain on our medical system or healthcare system, is the right thing to do. We can't sit down and expose our country to this. Listen, I remember, I think it was the member for East End, he and I had an issue dealing with, where a person genuinely needed a serious cancer case, like a real stage 4 type cancer thing, and could not get health insurance coverage. And what we were trying to do was to see what we could move it around, and it still came back to the point where this person had to return home to get that care. But we do also recognize, Mr. Speaker, that there are nationals right here, right now, that can't make it their way back home. We have many Cuban nationals right here, right now, that need help. And because the borders in Cuba are closed, can't, and these are responsibilities we have as the right human beings to do from a humanitarian standpoint. So we can't sit down and expose our healthcare system to this level of strain with thousands of people. So, and the Attorney General was right in making that case, Mr. Speaker. And in fairness, like I said, the former Premier recognized that also when he made his statement in this House December last year. You know, and the Attorney General did point out that the European Court of Human Rights found that the mandatory vaccines did not violate human rights, and that the wider the net, the less the chances of discrimination. You know, so this whole thing about we should have just limited it just the first timers getting, only people applying for work permit for the first time should have limited to them. We would have been chased out of court. We had to widen the net, and I can tell you, as we widen the net, we realize, you know what? There are some people inside the net that we didn't want to be in the net. We debated it, we went through it, and that's why we have these committee amendments. Because in our view, Mr. Speaker, once you're a Cayman and you have a right to be this country, there are certain rights that you have that the government can't take from you. If you want to marry an anti-vaxxer, that is your right. You know, we say, you know what, this can't stand for that because that's not the intention of that. And if we have to go to court now to make a case for that, then that we will do. That one we're prepared to fight for, if they say that that's an issue. Because that is what we are, that is what we are about. But the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is that every single person that comes here that has made their own unique contribution, I can tell you, that is part of where the success of our country comes from. And I use my own grandmother as an example, arrived over 70 years ago. You know, and I give credit to my aunts, my uncles, and even my previous uncle, George McCarthy, who spent many times in this house on also. Now, Mr. Speaker, I want to also thank the Honorable Deputy Governor for recognizing that the same rules should apply in government as to the private sector, and I agree. But I will also say, Mr. Speaker, and this may be a debate for a different time, but I'm throwing it in the universe too. There are two also things that came to mind quickly as I was listening to him with regards to having the civil service align with the private sector, or the public sector align with the private sector, and that is a rollover policy and maternity leave. Those two things need to be addressed because we can't have one country, one economy, one sector, but yet two different kind of rules. So that is something we can look at a different time for a different moment. But, Mr. Speaker, I started out talking about the law of unintended consequences. And I think one of the things, while we do recognize that there are challenges, one thing the Premier was clear with in his contribution to this debate is that we have to trust the science. Many of us are alive today because of science. We are living longer today because of science. Every day we put pills in our body, sometimes we don't even know what's inside them. But the doctor says to take them, we take them, and we trust the doctor. And just as how you trust the doctor and the doctor trusts the science, or if not, he wouldn't have been a doctor probably unless he's a bush doctor or something, that's a different story. But the bottom line about it is, this is what has made the difference. We're living longer, we're living smarter. I mean, 50 is now the new 40. And there may be a time, you look at speaker, I mean, look at, you're 85 and you look what, 40? Science. You know? So, I'm just checking if you're awake, Mr. Speaker, that's fine. But the point I'm making, Mr. Speaker, is what the Premier is saying, is that, do I know exactly how the messenger RNA and all of that works? No, I go and I watch my YouTube videos, I get my comfort level. And you look at the people who are making the presentations, and you say, you know what, you do a little research, you watch a couple of videos on the same thing, you listen to different people, and you get an idea. Do I fully understand it? No. But what I can say to you is that global warming is real and science is real. That is why we're here as a civilized country today. It has been the evolution of science. Now look at our mortality rate. For women it's 85, for men it's 79. There's a time, if you live past 65 or 60, you are elder. This is where we have come. 100 years ago, I think the average mortality rate was maybe about 45 or 50, 100 years ago. Look at it today. Science. You know, better food, better water, people that are not eating green meat, people are managing their own risk. We came together as a community and manage the risk together. We live longer. That's how it works. So, Mr. Speaker, I do recognize that this issue is emotive. I do understand that it is one that has caused a lot of discomfort with some people. I get that. We get that. We all get that. None of us wanted to be in this situation. But, Mr. Speaker, we cannot be responsible to the Caymanian people and everyone that calls the Cayman Islands home and run the risk of putting our healthcare system at risk. We cannot reopen, Mr. Speaker, and have the possibility of just having one bad flight wipe out our entire ICU beds, and there goes a flattened curve that became popular last year that no one speaks about. It is not the responsible thing to do. The member for Georgetown West, before he left, spoke about government responsibility. Mr. Speaker, eons ago, when people created government, they created government with three primary purposes: to protect your life, to protect your liberties and freedoms, and to protect your property. But the right to life was always first. And we help defend your right to life by putting laws in that discourages criminal behavior for people from taking people's lives or causing bodily harm. But we also go a step further, Mr. Speaker. We build hospitals. We build roads for you to get to those hospitals. We build schools to educate people to say you shouldn't eat this, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do different things, it's unhealthy. This is what a community does. This is what civilization looks like, Mr. Speaker. This is not about freedom to manage your own risk. Because for those who are unable to manage their own risk, then what should happen to them? Survival of the fittest? Darwinism? Is that what we're going back to? This is not how we move a country forward, Mr. Speaker. So, I started out by thanking everyone for their contribution, and I want to end by thanking everyone for their contribution. This is our system of government. This is how it works. We'll have disagreements, we'll have discord, we'll have dissent, but later on, all of us inside are going to have dinner. We're going to right there in the back, we're going to have dinner, we're going to laugh, and we're going to check this everybody's doing. But when we come here and we sit here, we have a job to do. I respect the leader of the opposition and the members in opposition. They have a job to do. And their job is to make sure that we are at least making the right decisions. That's how it works. And I look forward for them. And as I said before, from listening to the presentation of the member for Red Bay, with his keen legal eye, we did also pick up something that we missed, and that is what democracy is about. That's why we do have committee stage amendments, and that's why we have rules in place to allow these things. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank everyone again for their debate, and for the many people out there that are divided on this issue. Just remember, like the same-sex issues and other issues and the port and everything, this too shall pass, and the Cayman will be better and stronger for it. Thank you very much. God bless.
Question is that a bill shortly entitled the Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021 be given a second reading. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
No.
No.
The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I call for a division, please.
Clerk, can we divide?
Honorable Wayne Panton.
Aye.
Honorable Christopher Saunders.
Yes.
Honorable Kenneth Bryan.
Aye.
Honorable Sabrina Turner.
Aye.
Honorable Johanny E. Banks.
Aye.
Honorable Andre E. Banks.
Aye.
Honorable Bernie Bush.
Aye.
Honorable Juliana O'Connor Connolly.
Aye.
Miss Heather Bodden. Aye. Mr. Isaac Rankin. Aye. Honorable Catherine E. Banks Wilkes. Aye. Honorable Roy McTaggart.
No.
Mr. Joseph Yu.
No.
Mr. Dwayne Seymour. Mr. Moses Kirkconnell.
No.
Miss Barbara Connolly.
No.
Honorable Alda McLaughlin.
No.
Mr. David White. Absent.
The results of the division: 11 ayes, 6 noes, 1 absent. The Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021 has been given a second reading. The House will now go into committee to consider the bills. Please be seated. The House is now in committee, and with the leave of the House, we will assume that, as usual, we would authorize the Attorney General to correct minor errors and such alike in these bills.
Mr. Chairman, before you commence, Minister Saunders spoke about various committee stage amendments. Could we have a check to ensure that we have all of those that are to be debated before we start the process?
Just tell me. You have, I think, 2 on the Customs and Border Control. 2.
One, but it was 4 amendments for Coast Guard.
4 different amendments.
Yes.
On which one?
Cayman Islands Coast Guard bill.
On the Coast Guard bill, we should have you would have one document which contains about 4 short amendments.
Immigration
And the immigration transition,
has 4.
I think, has 4 separate amendments. Ready?
So I will present, I will start.
Honorable members, I think we're ready to proceed. Would the clerk please state the bill and read the clauses?
Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021. Clause 1, short title and commencement.
You read it? Question is that clause 1 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor? Aye. Those against?
Aye.
The ayes have it. Clause 1 do stand part of the bill.
Clause 2, amendment of Section 2 of the Customs and Border Control Act 2021 revision, interpretation.
Mr. Chairman,
Question is
I have an amendment.
amendment.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 2 by deleting the definition of the words approved vaccine course and substituting the following definition. Approved vaccine course means a vaccination course which A, prevents or suppresses any notifiable disease under Part 6 of the Public Health Act 2021 revision. B, has been approved for the purpose of this act by Cabinet, acting on advice of the Medical Officer of Health. And C, has been notified in the Gazette or in any other official government website or in any other official means of communication.
Any questions on the bill? Clause?
Mr. Chairman, just so we get the procedure right, because I want to make sure I'm debating the right thing. So the minister has moved an amendment to the bill. I believe we now have to vote that the bill be amended as the minister is now proposing, and then we can debate the amended, if necessary, the amended clause.
Yes.
Because otherwise we'd have, if I speak now,
I thought that's where we were, but let's make sure. The amendment has been moved by the minister.
right, but that's an amendment to the clause. And then you'd have, if it succeeds, you'd have to say, then the next motion is that the clause as amended be
Stand part of the bill.
stand part of the bill.
Yes.
Correct. I don't want to have a double debate because I want to ask some questions about this, but I want to deal with what the minister is proposing as part of the clause, not have two debates.
You've asked him, you've said that you've received an amendment, now you say the amendment has been duly made. Does any member wish to speak? And then page 13 on amendments. 13? 13. Back here. 13. So then the next thing, the question is the amendment sound part of it?
I didn't say that.
You just said this.
Question is that the amendment do stand part of the clause. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those
Aye.
against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause.
To the next page. Does anyone wish to speak on the clause as amended?
The clause has been amended. Does any member wish to speak on it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my concern is the point raised by Mr. David White. In committee, you don't speak of the people as you use their name, yeah, in committee. Mr. Chairman, I think what we are asking for is that the effect of this clause be made clear to us and to the broader public. The clause, as amended, provides that an approved vaccine course means a vaccination course which A, prevents or suppresses any notifiable disease under Part 6 of the Public Health Act 2021. B, has been approved for the purposes of this act by Cabinet acting on the advice of the Medical Officer of Health. And C, has been notified in the Gazette or in any other official government website or in any other official means of communication. Now, Mr. Chairman, what I gather from that are a few things. One, that as all of the categories of persons, I hate to use this word, but I don't know another one, all foreigners who are caught or who will be caught by the vaccination net set out in this act or this bill for the moment, the Customs and Border Control. They will be required to provide proof that they have been vaccinated against any notifiable disease that is set out in Part 6 of the Public Health Act, or that has been approved for that purpose by the Cabinet acting on the advice of the Medical Officer of Health, and that has subsequently been notified in the Gazette or any other official government website. So, Mr. Chairman, what I'm asking the Minister to confirm is that those persons who are caught by the vaccination net will now not just have to provide, as we had understood previously, a vaccination certificate that they've been vaccinated against COVID-19, but in fact, that they have been vaccinated against all notifiable diseases that are either listed in Part 6 or have been added to that list subsequently by Cabinet on the advice of the CMO.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Chairman, sorry, thank you. Mr. Chairman, first of all, approved course of vaccine means a vaccination course which A, prevents or suppresses any notifiable disease under Part 6 of the Public Health Act 2021 revision, but it doesn't say or, really. Is really, no, it's not or, is and, really. So B is all cumulative.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, the Learned Attorney General has just lost me.
I thought you read after you says A, you says or, but there's no or there.
My error. Okay.
Okay.
But that still doesn't answer my question.
So it is and then the only one that they will be required to declare is the one that is gazetted from time to time. So it's not the whole menu of notifiable disease. It's just one that is gazetted that it will be required to declare. But what is happening here is that the act has been written in such a way that if you have another disease sometime down the road, you don't have to go back and amend the act to deal with that again. You can just basically just gazette which the disease of the day, and they will have to declare that they're vaccinated against that.
Mr. Chairman, I thank the Learned Attorney General and just wanted to make sure that we all understand what this means then. Yeah. So until the passage of this bill, there was hitherto no requirement for any foreigner who comes here to live on a long-term basis to have to
declare,
provide proof of vaccination. And what is now being proposed, at least for the time being, is that the bill, the law will be amended so that Cabinet can approve.
Under this act?
Under this act, yes. The Cabinet can approve, or Cabinet can mandate that any notifiable disease which is set out in Part 6 of the Public Health, that the foreigner who's coming here in those circumstances is required to provide proof of vaccination of that or those particular disease or diseases.
Thank you. And for present purpose, says that would be COVID-19. That is the one who would have specified.
That is the intent of Cabinet. Thank you, sir.
Does any other member wish to speak on this amendment? If not, the question is that Clause 2 as amended stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 2 as amended stands part of the bill.
Okay. Now this is the one I have a problem with that. Before we go on to the next one, this one, if it's inserting, is referring to the wrong standing order. It's referring to standing order 52A.
Yeah, but I don't know.
So I would say it's doing this amendment.
If he's satisfied, we can have be satisfied. Yeah, he's satisfied. Yeah, go on to it. No, 2, huh?
Go on to 3 now.
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Wait a minute. This is where we go next.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And we come back here. Amended amendment stands part of the clause. Could we call on the minister?
Yes. Yes.
No, you move.
Yep. So
Read it.
We're good. We're good. Clause 3, insertion of sections 110A and 110B, requirement for mandatory vaccinations for persons under this part, exemptions by the medical officer of health.
Mr. Chairman,
The minister?
in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 3 in the proposed section 110A, subsection 2, by deleting paragraphs B and C.
He said, oh, no, 8. That's okay, in a minute. Did you say 108 or 110?
110A,
110A.
subsection 2.
Yes. Subsection 2, that's what he's reading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question is that the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, so say aye.
Oh, does any,
Aye.
does any member wish to speak?
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause.
Does anyone wish to speak on the clause as amended?
Does anyone want to speak on the clause as amended? If not, the question is that clause 3 as amended stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 3 as amended stands part of the bill.
So I go on 4 now, and then insertion.
This one,
But that goes after we pass all of them,
okay.
I think, and then move on to it.
Okay, then.
Clause 4, amendment of Section 133, General Regulations.
That's just a regular one, so is there any questions on the clause? If not, I will put the question.
No. Let's move it. Honorable Minister.
Okay, we'll finish this clause. So clause 4, we have to finish. So are there any questions on this clause? Clause 4. Okay. Are there any questions on clause? If there-
I thought I'd asked if there was any questions, but nobody moved
Clause
to
4.
clause 4. So clause 4.
The question is, clause 4, do you stand part of
So
the bill?
the question should be the clause 4 stands part of the bill. All in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 4
Stands part.
stands part of the bill.
So now,
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52,
there's an insertion.
Which one? Where are we
An insertion.
in the process?
Mr. Chairman.
Minister?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended by inserting after Clause 2 the following clause. Amendment of Section 94, entry by persons other than Caymanians or persons legal and ordinary resident. 2A, the Principal Act is amended in Section 94.2 by inserting after the words, in the islands, the words, and shall not require a student visa.
Okay. He's done that. So the student visa. Okay, so you say the new clause.
That clause.
Mhm.
The new clause.
Yep. 2A. New clause 2A.
I know it's a new clause.
So you say the new clause 2A having been read the first time. The question is that this clause fail. All those in favor, please say aye.
The new clause having been read the first time. The question is now that the clause be read a second time. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The clause is deemed to have been read a second time.
Is there any debate on the new clause?
Is there anyone wanting to say anything on this new clause?
If there is no debate,
If there's no debate,
I will put the question.
the question is now that the new clause
2A.
2A. Am I right? 2A? 2A.
The question is, this clause be added, clause clause 2A.
The question is that the new clause 2A be added to the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against?
Clause
The ayes have it. The new clause stands part of the bill.
is added to the bill. Okay, so that's
That's what it is.
so okay.
A bill for an act to amend the Customs and Border Control Act.
That's one of it. She's doing that now. Read the title.
A bill for an act to amend the Customs and Border Control Act 2021 revision in order to provide in certain circumstances for mandatory vaccination and for incidental and connected purposes.
The question is that the title of the bill stands,
The question is, it's how to do stand part of the bill.
that
Those in favor?
the question is that the title do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? Is it? Have it. And the
Title stands part of the bill.
title is now part of the bill.
Next one.
Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021. Clause 1, short title. Clause 2, interpretation.
So those are good. So, are there any questions on the clauses? If not, I will put the question. The question
What did
is,
you just
clauses
read?
1
Is there any question on the clause?
and 2.
It is 1 and 2.
Yes.
If not, all in favor?
Okay, all in favor? Say aye. All those against? The ayes have it. Clause 1 and 2 stands part of the bill.
The question is that clauses 1 and 2 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 1 and 2 stands part of the bill.
Clause 3, establishment of the Coast Guard.
This one, Honorable Premier, you call on Honorable Premier for the amendment.
The Premier?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In accordance with Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 3 by deleting subclause 3 and substituting the following subclause 3. Nothing contained in this act shall be construed so as to permit the Coast Guard to be organized as a military establishment or a military organization, or to function as a military establishment or a military organization.
The amendment has been duly moved. Does any member wish to speak? If not, the question is that the amendment stands part of the bill. All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the bill.
Clause 4, Constitution of the Coast Guard. Clause 5, financial provision for the Coast Guard. Clause 6, command and administration of the Coast Guard. Clause 7, delegation of governor's functions. Clause 4 through 7.
Question is that clauses 4 through to 7 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 4 to 7 stands part of the bill.
Clause 8, general powers of the Commandant.
Mr. Chairman.
Mayor?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. In accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 8 as follows. A, by inserting after subclause 7 the following subclause 7A, where A temporary maritime exclusion zone or temporary maritime restricted zone is established in accordance with subsection 3, or B, the period of the temporary maritime exclusion zone or the temporary maritime restricted zone is extended in accordance with subsection 4, the Commandant shall cause an administrative notice to that effect to be published in an official government website or in any other official means of communication within 24 hours after the Cabinet is notified. B, in subclause 9, by deleting the words vessel or certain types or classes of vessels are, wherever they appear, and substituting the words persons unless authorized by a commissioned officer are. And C, by inserting after subclause 9 the following subclauses. 10, for the purposes of the definitions under subsection 9, the authorization by the commissioned officer shall be in writing unless exceptional circumstances exist, in which case the commissioned officer may give the authorization verbally, but shall, within 24 hours after the verbal authorization is given, confirm the authorization in writing. 11, where a person other than a person authorized by a commissioned officer enters into a temporary maritime exclusion zone or temporary maritime restricted zone during a period in which entry is excluded or restricted, as applicable, the person commits an offense and is liable on summary conviction to a fine of $3,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 1 year or to both. And 12, where a person is convicted of an offense under subsection 11, the court may order that any goods or money in respect of which the offense was committed and is in that person's possession be forfeited to the Crown or otherwise disposed of.
The amendment has been duly moved. Is there anyone wishing to speak thereto? If not, the question is that the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause.
And then the next thing you say is, does anyone wish to speak on the clause as amended?
The clause has been amended. Does anyone wish to speak thereto? I just say that.
You said the first part, and then can you go on to this? And then you say this. Yep. The question is this.
The question is that clause 8 as amended stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 8 as amended stands part of the bill.
Clause 9, duties of the Coast Guard. Clause 10, Coast Guard power of arrest. Clause 11, general powers of the Coast Guard.
Question is that clauses 9 through to 11 stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 9 to 11 stands part of the bill.
Clause 12, seizure, custody, and disposal of a vessel believed to have been used in the commission of an offence.
Honourable Premier.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. In accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 12 by inserting after subclause 3 the following subclauses. 4. If proceedings are instituted against a person for an offence relating to a vessel or structure seized under Section 11(1)(g), and A, the proceedings do not result in the person's conviction for the offence, or B, where the person is convicted of the offence, Roman 1, the conviction concerned is quashed without a conviction for any other offence related to a vessel or structure seized under Section 11(1)(g) being substituted, or Roman 2, Her Majesty has granted pardon in respect of the conviction, the Grand Court may, on an application by the person, in parentheses, the applicant, order compensation to be paid by the government to the applicant. 5, the Grand Court shall not order compensation to be paid in any case unless it is satisfied, A, that there has been some serious default on the part of a person involved in investigation or prosecution of the offense concerned, and that but for that default, the proceedings would not have been instituted or continued, and B, that the applicant has suffered substantial loss in consequence of anything done in relation to the vessel or structure by or in pursuance of an order of the Grand Court under this section. 6, subsection 6, the amount of compensation to be paid under this section shall be such as the Grand Court thinks just in all the circumstances.
The amendment has been moved. Does any member wish to speak to that amendment? The question then is, the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. The amendment stands part of the clause. This is. Yes. The question is that clause 12 as amended stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 12 as amended now stands part of the bill.
23.
Clause 13, fees in respect of vessels or structures taken into custody or stored by the Coast Guard.
Question is that the question is that clause 13 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. I understand that there should be an amendment coming from the Minister of Home Affairs. Can you read that amendment? Use your mic, please.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion that clause 14, subclause 2 be deleted and the following substituted. 2, the governor shall appoint A, a commandant and a deputy commandant, B, a Coast Guard medical officer, and these officers shall be Caymanian as defined in the Immigration Transition Act 2021 revision.
Mr. Chairman, has that amendment been circulated?
No, if members recall, the minister did rise to speak and did give notice in his speech that he was going to move this amendment. And so I allowed it to be read from the floor of the House.
Without the opposition even having a courtesy copy of what is being proposed?
The opposition leader was sitting where he is sitting right now. And
Mr. Chairman, I'm saying...
Honorable member, if members want to take the time of this House, after the member gave notice, if members want to take the time to get a written one, so be it, we will allow that. But he did give notice. I have allowed it because it was a simple amendment. But if members on the opposite side wants it, let's stop right now and get it done.
Show it to Arlene, please.
The standing orders. If you got a copy, make sufficient copies, send more. For the proceedings of any business on the constitution of the shall return to the chair of the House, see that the presiding officer is of opinion, which the House as committee is engaged, to be concluded by a short deferment of the moment he may be.
Oh, you may defer interrupting the business.
Huh? Read it.
Yeah, so you can, instead of interrupting it now, you can...
Interruption, but that's if the presiding officer is of the opinion that the proceedings on which the House is committee is engaged, these proceedings now, should be considered by a short deferment of the moment of interruption. He may, by his discretion, defer interrupting the business. Now let's see how long we go.
Okay.
The question is, the amendment has been duly moved. Does any member wish to speak to it? And for best practice, I'd ask the clerk to read that title of that clause. Clause 14.
Clause 14, appointment of officers to the Coast Guard.
Yes. That's what we are waiting on to see if the opposition has any member. So the Minister of Tourism.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank the honorable elected member and Minister, Mr. Bernie Bush, for bringing this amendment. It's a long-standing position that he's been taking about promoting and positioning Caymanians in the high-ranking positions of many of these security positions like fire, police, now the Coast Guard, and I commend him for keeping his footing and his commitment to that. So I support this motion, obviously, on behalf of the government, but I just think it would be appropriate that we commend the Minister Bush for bringing this amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. Would the Minister read that amendment again, please? You might, please.
Clause 4, subclause 2. The governor should appoint a...
Clause 14. You're moving a motion at clause 14, subclause 2. So read that full thing just for the sake of completeness.
In accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion that clause 14, subclause 2 be deleted and the following substituted. The governor should appoint... No, you cannot use the word shall. I know, but you can't say the word shall. It says should.
That's correct. Read it as you have written it.
Oh, sorry. In the thing is, it says the governor shall appoint a commandant and a deputy commandant, B, a Coast Guard medical officer. And these officers should be Caymanian as defined in the Immigration Transition Act 2021 revision. I just want to make sure that at all times our people can, who are able and well and able and willing to do these things, are given the chance to make sure that they're there.
No, this amendment in accordance with amending, so we're here.
Amendment?
So,
The amendment has been duly moved. Does any member wish to speak? Otherwise, we'll move on. If no member wishes to speak, the question is that the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. Question is, does anyone want to speak on the amendment as
to clause 14.
clause 14? Clause 14 as a, yes. If not, the question is that clause 14 as amended stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 14 as amended stands part of the bill.
Clause 15, appointment of civilian support staff of the Coast Guard. Clause 16, secondment to the Coast Guard. Clause 17, identity card. Clause 18, resignations. Clause 19, termination of appointment and discharge. Clause 20, retirement and pensions. Clause 21, medical privileges. Clause 22, discrimination based on becoming a member of the Coast Guard Reserve. Clause 23, obligatory annual service.
Question is that clauses 15 to 23 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 15 to 23 stands part of the bill.
Clause 24, resisting or obstructing an arrest.
The Premier, I think you have an amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 24(1) by deleting the words "to a fine or to imprisonment for a term of 10 years or to both," and substituting the words to a fine of $5,000 or to imprisonment for a term of 2 years or to both.
The amendment has been moved. Does any member wish to speak to? If not, the question now is that the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. Does anyone wish to speak to the clause as amended? But I will put the question. The question now is that clause 24 as amended stands part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 24 as amended stands part of the bill.
Clause 25, unauthorized use of uniform and decorations. Clause 26, application of the Traffic Act 2021 revision to Coast Guard vehicles. Clause 27, ICT licensees' duties in respect of the Coast Guard. Clause 28, regulations. Clause 29, amendment of schedules. Clause 30, appeals. Clause 31, Coast Guard Legal Protection Fund and Coast Guard Legal Protection Fund Committee. Clause 32, information may be recorded and sent by electronic means. Clause 33, vesting of property. Clause 34, transition of officers of the Joint Marine Unit to the Coast Guard. Clause 35, transitional provisions in respect of appointments to the Coast Guard prior to the date of commencement of this Act.
So we do 24 through 35. 25 through 35.
Question is that clauses 25 through to 35 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 25 through to 35 is now part of the bill.
Schedule 1, ranks of officers of the Coast Guard. Schedule 2, form of commission conferring rank upon an officer of the Coast Guard. Schedule 3, identity card. Schedule 4, fees for vessels or structures in the custody of or stored by the Coast Guard.
So schedules 1 through 4.
Do stand part of the bill.
Yes.
Question is that Schedule 1, 2, 3, and 4 do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clauses 1 to 4, Schedules 1 to 4 is now part of the bill. Short item.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard, to specify the duties and powers of the Cayman Islands Coast Guard, and for incidental and connected purposes.
Question is that the title do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The title stands part of the bill.
Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021. Clause 1, short title and commencement.
The
Is there any questions about it?
question is that the clause do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The clause stands part. Clauses 1 do stand part of the bill.
Clause 2, Amendment of Section 2 of the Immigration Transition Act 2021 revision. Interpretation.
Clause 2.
Mr. Chairman.
The Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 2 by deleting the definition of the words approved vaccine course and substituting the following definition. Approved vaccine course means a vaccination course which A, prevents or suppresses any notifiable disease under Part 6 of the Public Health Act 2021 revision. B, has been approved for the purposes of this act by Cabinet, acting on advice of the Medical Officer of Health. And C, has been notified in the Gazette or in any other official government website or in any other official means of communication. Thank you.
The amendment has been duly moved.
Okay.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unless somebody wanted to speak. If no, the question is that the amendment stands part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. Does anyone wishing to speak on the clause as amended? If not, I'll put the question. The question is that clause 2 as amended stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 2 as amended stands part of the bill.
Clause 3. Insertion of sections 52A and 52B. Mandatory vaccinations for persons specified under Part 6 and exemptions by the Medical Officer of Health.
Mr. Chairman.
Minister?
Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 3 in the proposed new Section 52A2 by deleting paragraphs B and C.
To take them one time, or you do separately? Yes, one time.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Standing Order 52, I beg to move a motion for the bill to be amended in Clause 3 in the proposed new Section 52A2 by deleting paragraphs B, C, and D. And also, Mr. Chairman, in subsection 2, subsection A, by inserting before the words 37, the words subject to subsection 2A, and B, by inserting after subsection 2 the following subsection 2A, subsection 1, does not apply to a variation of a residence and employment rights certificate under section 37.5. Thank you.
Question is that the amendment has been duly moved. Does any person, any member wishes to speak to those amendments? The question is that those amendments stand part of the clause. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The amendment stands part of the clause. Question of is, does anyone wish to speak on the clause as amended? The question is that clauses 3. Clause 3, as amended, stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. Clause 3 stands part, as amended, stands part of the bill.
Clause 4, amendment of Section 53, persons exempted. Clause 5, insertion of Section 53A, mandatory vaccinations for persons under Section 53, subsection 1, subsection B. Clause 6, amendment of Section 56, application for work permits. Clause 7, amendment of Section 63, grant or refusal of work permit. Clause 8, amendment of Section 66, term limits. Clause 9, amendment of Section 72, regulations.
Question is that clauses 4 through to 9 do now stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the ayes have it. Clauses 4 through to 9 is now part of the bill.
Okay, I'm going to do the title. A bill for an act to amend the Immigration Transition Act 2021 revision in order to provide in certain circumstances for mandatory vaccination and for incidental and connected purposes.
Question is that the title do stand part of the bill. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the ayes have it. The short title do stand part of this bill.
Long title. That was a long title.
Schedule.
That was, we finished it. That was a long title. You said short title.
Okay. Question is now that the bills be reported to the Honorable House. All those in favor, please say aye. Those against, the bills will be reported to the Honorable House. Yeah, and then I pick up here, right? Reporting bills.
This one now is you, and then I'll, yep.
Yeah. Honorable members, the House now resumes. Please be seated. Honorable Premier, can you move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 in order for the House to conduct business?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the suspension of Standing Order 10-2 so that the business of the House may continue beyond the hour of interruption.
The question is that the House, that's Standing Order 10-2 be suspended in order for business to be conducted at this time. All in favor? All in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The House will continue its business. Clerk.
Report on bills. Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021.
The Honorable the Deputy Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am to report that the Customs and Border Control Bill, I am to report that the Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021 by a committee of the whole House, and the bill was passed with amendments.
The bill has been duly reported and is set down for the third reading.
Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021.
The Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am to report that the bill, short titled the Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021, was considered by a committee of the whole House and passed with amendments.
The bill has been duly reported and is set down for third reading.
Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021.
The Honorable Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021, as amended during the committee stage consideration of the bill, be given a third reading and passed.
The bill has been duly reported and is set down for the third reading.
Third readings. Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021.
The Honorable third reading. The Honorable the Minister, the Deputy Premier, Minister responsible for Customs and Border Control. Third reading.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021, as amended during the committee stage consideration of the bill, be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill entitled the Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021 be given a third reading and passed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Customs and Border Control Amendment Bill 2021 has been read a third time and is passed.
Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021.
The Honorable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that a bill short titled the Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021 be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021 be given a third reading and passed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Cayman Islands Coast Guard Bill 2021 has been read a third time and is passed.
Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021.
The Honorable the Deputy Premier.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021, as amended during the committee stage consideration of the bill, be given a third reading and passed.
The question is that a bill shortly entitled the Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021 be given a third reading and passed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. The Immigration Transition Amendment Bill 2021 has been read a third time and is passed. The Honorable the Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank all members for their contributions and cooperation, and I therefore, having completed the business of the special meeting, move the adjournment of this Honourable House sine die.
Question. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, sir. Mr. Speaker, may I just ask if the Premier could give us some indication on this side of the House when next you do expect to convene the House for regular business? I know that we're coming up towards the end of the year budget session and any other business that we might need to conclude.
Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Honourable Leader of the Opposition for the question. At this point, I think I understand he's asking for an indication of when we may next be in Parliament. That is difficult to say immediately, sir. I will endeavour to get some clarity around that and give him an indication in the next couple of days. Because I know members have plans and they have lives and things to organize, so we'll try to be clear about that. Thank you, sir.
Question is that this honorable House now stands adjourned. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against? The ayes have it. This honorable House now stands adjourned. Sine die.